Well, hi, I am Kim Quigley. I'm the director of the Child and Family Leadership Program at Summit Pacific College. And for the majority of my life, I have been involved in children's ministry. I've been a volunteer, and I've been a pastor, and I've been a volunteer again. And in all of those roles, I've had some high highs and some low lows and everything in between. Now, there was this one night during Kids Zone on a Wednesday night, and I was sitting in a room with my small group around an old banquet table with a cheap dollar store plastic tablecloth. And it seemed as though my small group had the goal of poking holes just to see how strong or how weak that plastic tablecloth actually was. Now, the holes in the tablecloth was the least of my frustrations. That night, it seemed as though everything was going sideways. One student was taking the snack of another student. Another student kept on touching another one of the small group members. It seemed like everyone was yelling. Our lesson on the fruit of the Spirit, which happened to be on patience, was going nowhere, and it seemed like my patience, I had none left. And then there was a student who kept interrupting me. It was so frustrating. And then to add to all of that, it seemed like everybody had to go pee. It was so chaotic. It was such a terrible night. And I was wondering how this could happen because last week we had such a great week. Well, isn't that the nature of small groups, right? It's a 50-50 chance, it seems, of whether it's going to be terrible or whether it's going to be amazing or whether it's going to be fully engaged or spiraling into chaos. But we still do small groups, don't we? We do them because we know how fundamental they are to devotional life, to discipleship, to building community, to caring for students. We know that small groups are so fundamental to next gen ministry. And so we do small groups. We've all had those small group experiences though, haven't we? Where they've gone sideways, maybe like the one I explained, where somebody's asking the questions that you wish they would avoid, or somebody derails the conversation completely. We've all had those experiences. We've all had that experience where we hoped that it was going to be great, and then it just seemed so chaotic. Now, small groups, because they're so valuable, we want to know how we can manage those chaotic situations so that we can get the most out of the potential of our small group time. So I'd love to chat with you about 4 simple ways that we can manage chaos in our small groups. First, we can manage our chaotic small group by being prepared. Seems so simple. But when we are prepared as leaders, there's the potential for chaos to go down so significantly. And we can do this in 2 ways. First, by defining our role as the leader. And secondly, by keeping our small groups small. So let's take a look at defining our role. We can be a really awesome small group leader when we know our why. It goes back to knowing that small groups are incredible for disciple making, amazing for community building, and so wonderful for care. That's why we do it. And when we know why, we can be confident leaders, and confident leaderships curb chaotic small groups. So we want to know why we're doing this and have a clear definition of our role as the leader. Secondly, we want to keep our small groups small. Often in children's ministry, when we're putting together our small groups, we often use our protection plan as a guide to build our small group ratio of kids to leaders. I'd like to recommend using a lower number. This way, if you're using your small group as an outreach opportunity for your students to bring their friends, there is actually space for new people to join your small group. See, if we are functioning at maximum capacity of our small group of ratio of students to leaders, then it creates some anxiety for the leader, doesn't it? Where we don't feel like we can manage the group well. So if we can keep our small groups small, we're able to keep engagement high and chaos low. So when we're preparing for our small group time, we want to define our role and we want to keep our small groups small. In keeping our small groups small, that requires two things. One, for our ministry leader or our children's pastor or youth pastor, it means that recruitment is continuous. And so we want to keep having more small group leaders who understand the value of small groups and why they need to be a part of a small group and mentor students. So recruitment is needed. The second component that's required in keeping our small groups small is communication between the small group leader and the ministry leader. Small group leaders, can I encourage you to let your ministry leader know when you're functioning at maximum capacity so that we can start expanding our small groups a bit more and we can have manageable sizes so that we can keep chaos low. So the first thing that we can do in managing chaos in our small groups is be prepared. The second thing that we can do to manage chaos is to know our small group. That sounds so simple, again, but it's the simple things that really do help. So how we can know our small group is first by knowing the name and the interests of your students immediately. Again, sounds simple, but when we try to rely on things like, hey pal, buddy, friend, it doesn't take the relationship deep at all. We can't move in our community building. We want to know our students' names, but we also want to know what interests them. We want to find out what they love, and we want to hear about the things that they love. See, have your students teach you the things that interest them. It doesn't really matter if it interests us. We want to know what interests them and show them that what they are interested in is so fascinating just because it's their interest. And when we know what interests them and when they have that sense that they're valuable to us and that we actually care about what is interesting to them, that interest is then reciprocated. We then have a student who feels like they're valuable to the group and that the engagement level is now much higher, which means chaos is much lower. So know our students and what is interesting to them. The second way that we can know our students is to know the way that they see the world. When we can understand and appreciate how they see the world or what informs their questions, what informs their answers, what informs their concerns, we're able to create a small group environment that embraces the diversity that's found in our small group and values that diversity. Let me give you an example. Remember in my story at the very beginning about the kid that kept interrupting me? Well, that same night, I was having a conversation with his mother after our program had ended. And we were engaged. We weren't necessarily talking about the student. We were just talking. And his mom was engaging with me and fully engaged in the conversation. And as I was talking, she was talking with me. And for her to be engaged in communication and to be an active listener, it meant that she was actually talking with me. Once I realized that that was her way of engaging, I understood that what I thought was maybe rudeness or being disrespectful or interrupting was actually his way of engaging. See, when we understand and when we take the time to understand where our students are coming, what their worldview is, it gives us space to value their uniquenesses and their values. And it gives us space to have an engaging small group as opposed to a chaotic small group. So the last thing that we want to do to know our small group is to know how our students process, how they're thinking. See, when we can understand how our students are thinking or understand how they're processing what's going on around them, we can create a really incredible small group environment. See, when we recognize that not all students think the same and we take the time to learn how they might process the world, the incredible conversations that could come out, the fun, the great dynamics that could come in our small groups is quite fascinating. See, the way that we learn is so dynamic. We have visual learners. We have learners who are going to be verbal. They're going to be our first talkers. We are going to have those kids that are humming. And yet those are the kids who process the world through music. We're going to have those students who feel like they have to be moving all the time. And yet those students, they're processing their world because they're physical and they use their body to process what's going on. We need to remember that there are students that are introspective and they're going to take some time and they're not going to be the first to answer a question. We need to make space and learn about our students so that we can create an environment where our diversity is celebrated and we can actually make space for each one to contribute to our small group. See, when we can actually embrace the differences of how our students process what they're experiencing, it means that engagement increases and chaos decreases. So we want to know our group. We want to know our small group. Now, this takes time. It takes time to know kids. It takes time to know your students. It takes time to know your young adults. And I would say, please take the time. Be patient with yourself. Be patient with your group, because this is so valuable to small groups. It's about community building. And so take the time to build that community, to build those relationships. It's worth it. So third, we want to create an environment that works for your small group. So how we do that is very different depending on your environment, and we do have some obstacles to this. So first off, we might not even be meeting physically with our small groups yet. So that's an obstacle. How do we create an environment when we're actually not together? The second obstacle is what we would consider as an ideal small group environment, and what is actually realistic in the local church building often seem like they're at two ends of the spectrum. And so we definitely have obstacles when we're creating an environment that works for our small groups. So we work with what we've got and we do the best. Now, here's a few things that we can do when we are in a physical space together. We do want to create a space that is engaging and it has some structure to it. So let's take a look at what an engaging environment might look like. So when we create an engaging environment, one of the things that we can do in our small groups, seeing that one of the high values of small groups is discipleship building, is to give our students leadership opportunities within our group. So when our students are learning, implementing, maybe they're going to be teaching biblical principles, they're utilizing and gaining new leadership skills, which means they increase a sense of belonging and a sense of value. So when students have that sense of learning a new skill, having a sense of belonging and value, the level of engagement, again, increases so significantly. And then that means that the chaotic behavior or things that might create a chaotic small group, it decreases. So to create an environment that is engaging, give our students opportunities to lead. That's a great way to engage our students. Another way for us to think about maybe even our physical spaces of how we create an engaging physical space is to think through the 5 senses. What are we seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, smelling in our space? And are our senses, are they leading us towards being engaged in our small group, or are they being distracted and drawing our attention away from our small group? See, we may have to add things or take away things that might overstimulate us for our small group. A great way to, again, engage our students is to have them help create that environment. do the decorating, create a playlist, and maybe a student is going to bring a diffuser so it really smells so good in the room. See, we can engage our students to create an engaging environment. It'll be wonderful. Now, there is the possibility, like I mentioned, that we won't be together physically. So then how do we create an engaging environment when we're in different spaces? This is going to need a thinking outside of the box, absolutely. But it's possible, right? And perhaps that means that instead of having a physical room to be in, maybe students are having a physical token or a toy or a picture that they all have to share in their have at their space so that they can all have this similar experience. Or what if they even had the same Zoom background so they have this similar experience of an engaging environment even on Zoom? See, we can make things happen. It just, some creativity. And I know that you guys have some incredible creative minds. Now, no matter if we're in person or we're meeting virtually, when engagement goes up, chaos goes down. And a great way to increase engagement is to have students articulate the emotional environment that they would like to have in their small group. And when they're able to create or articulate what they would like to have as their emotional environment, an engaging environment, that helps to create structure. So let's take a look at structure for a moment. When students know what to expect, then they are full in. They know how to involve themselves in our small groups. So we want to let students know what to expect. And a great way, as I mentioned, is to let kids and let students share what's valuable to them so that they can create a structure for them. In children's ministry, sometimes we do this where we have the kids discuss what our rules are, things that we won't do. This is a bit of a twist on that concept. Instead of talking about what we won't do, let's talk about what we value. See, students, when they share their values and have a shared value system within the group, students' engagement in small groups increases, and again, chaos decreases. When students are able to share that they would like an environment that is encouraging, that they want their environment to feel as though they're all equals, when they want their environment to be a place where they're listened to and heard, that they take turns, and that it's safe. When students are able to articulate and when a small group is able to define the things that they value, engagement level is so significant. Now, in the event that something chaotic happens, this is when we can draw the attention of our small group back to our values. This is who we are as a group. We're a group that listens. We're a group that encourages. And we're a group that's safe. See, value systems are a great place to establish our structure for our small group. The last thing that I want to articulate and the last tip that we can use to help manage a chaotic small group is to remember what small groups are all about. It's a little bit of the first point, but this is so important. See, small groups are a long game thing. It's not about completing the 5 discussion questions that you might have been given. And small groups aren't about just completing the creative activity that's related to a curriculum. No, small groups are about people. They're about people who are becoming disciples. They're about people who are building community. They're about people who are being cared for. See, it's much different when we focus on people than when we focus on task. See, if we focus on task, then it often feels like our small groups are chaotic. But when we remember that small groups are about people learning and growing together to be devoted followers of Jesus, that's what small groups is all about. So can I encourage you to know who you are as your leader, as the leader? Take some time to get to know your kids. Get to know your students. Get to know your young adults. And to take some time to build an environment that's an engaging one, that has some structure for your students so they know what to expect. And then just remember what it's all about. This is about people growing together to love Jesus. Now, again, it's not about behavior management, it's about people. And it's about you. And I want to thank you for all of your investment, for believing in small groups, for believing in the next generation, and for mentoring the next gen. I want to say thank you so much for all that you're doing, and God bless you as you lead your small group.